Steve Scalise couldn't get to 217. Kevin McCarthy couldn't get to 217. That's the number of votes you need. Maybe the second coming of Kevin McCarthy. Well, no, he's not going to get to 217. So we're at a moment now where no one knows what's going to happen. And the Republican Party, which is supposed to be the majority party, the governing party, is demonstrating in real time, in bright colors, that it is uninterested in the business of government or has lost the ability. So again, it's the juxtaposition of the horrors of the real world and this fucking clown car that we're seeing in Washington, D.C.
Clowns, you said it this morning, clowns with flamethrowers.
Well, they've been handing, look, I mean, this is the thing, all of this chaos, this is what Republicans wanted. This was kind of, I said, I mean, they've been asking for this, right? They wanted the revolution. They wanted to burn it down. They empowered the political suicide bombers. This is what you get when you elevate and you empower the fringe players, when you hand flamethrowers to clowns. And they're like, how did this happen to us?
Yeah, when you mentioned the problem of, they don't understand governing or they don't want to go. I think that this is all the cascading failure that began in 2016 of people who never expected to be where they are suddenly in positions that they don't understand. I think, it's objectively true that, Lauren Boebert or, these other, they have no idea what they're doing in Congress. Yeah. But it's also, a group of people who, finding themselves where they are, have decided that the most important thing is to stay where they are. And that, that removes any possibility for governing, which requires not being on camera all the time, which requires not, just scoring cheap points all the time. And
that's the
I
point
think
of the
it's
realm,
not so
though.
much that they,
right. But I mean, that's the incentive structure for these guys.
Right. Well, who do I always blame? The voters, we the people, who, have looked at this clown show and said, well, I'm getting what I want. I'm not getting legislation, but I don't want legislation because the voters, and, I'm just going to bang the desk again here. The voters don't understand how government works. They don't understand how it is that all this happens. So they don't care what their representatives are doing.
I'm going to take your point there, but I also think that it's worth pointing out that something like 94% of the Republican caucus did not want to do this. Look, I'm not trying to defend Kevin McCarthy, but you do have 7 members of the caucus who decided to blow things up. So you had the crazed, slavering jackal caucus that threw Kevin McCarthy out. Now there's a whole group of others that were saying we are never Scalise. There's going to be a group that's never whoever the next name is that comes up. It is this tiny minority.
But that's the key, Charlie.
Party. But they've been empowered. They've been given the clout.
But I'm not going to let you just boil this down to those 7 because after this happened, everyone else in the House should have gotten together and said, we need a speaker, needs to be a compromise candidate, needs to happen right now. And the first thing we're going to do is defang these 7 kooks. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you and I are living in a world where it is at least notionally possible that Jim Jordan would become the Speaker of the People's House and in line to the presidency of the United States is so utterly fantastic and Friday the 13th isn't a bit, not because Jim Jordan is some, trans-dimensional, warlock, but because he's an idiot, but because he was a kind of Carney Barker candidate whose job was to represent some people in Ohio and their kooky conspiracy. He was never supposed to get these Frankensteins were never supposed to get off the table.
Well, I mean, and by the way, as another sign of how deeply unserious all this is, the fact that for a few days they were actually talking about electing Donald Trump as speaker. I mean, this is how ridiculous it is. And so then, I mean, look, in a rational universe, Jim Jordan would never be allowed close to the speaker's chair. You're absolutely right. But again, I'm not trying to. I agree with you on the that this is not just the 7. I want to make that clear. I wrote the book.
Is it 8?
How
now,
the
7 or 8?
How the right, well, it's a different group. It keeps shifting. I mean, there's a large group of people who frankly don't care whether or not they've shut down the Congress of the United States. And, it's, one day it's Matt Gaetz, the next day it's I don't know. It's always Nancy Mace, with one outfit after another. But I mean, look, this is a party that has been losing its mind for a long time, and now it's lost its way, and now it's basically proving that it has no interest in governing. But I mean, this is also what you get when you sneer at things like compromise, prudence, when you treat bipartisanship or consensus as bad things, when you snark about norms, when you flout the law, when you do all of these things, when you go deeper and deeper into these hermetically sealed alternative realities, and you indulge, year after year of demagoguery and indecency, when you take your cues from Donald Trump, really should you be surprised to wake up finding out that you are being roasted by clowns with flamethrowers? So there is that sort of incomprehension on the part of so many of these Republicans. Look, how did this happen? Well, you've been doing this now for years, and all of the incentive structures, all of the bomb throwers that you've elevated, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, really, what did you think was going to happen? I mean, when you said you wanted to burn it all down, when you said you wanted a revolution, when you said, norms are for cucks and we don't ever need to compromise, or actually, maybe we'll even shut the federal government down. What do you think? Where did we think this was going?
I don't think they really believed that they were going to get away with any of that. I think they thought it was cool stuff to say. I mean, it's kind of like the ongoing discussions about Republicans and Roe v. Wade, right? The dog's catching the car. It's like, wow, we agitated for that for years, and then we had no idea that it could actually happen. Yeah. And now we're kind of, we're kind of stuck. The other thing that's, I think, important to point out, you're right about the media talking about dysfunction and chaos. But it's not the dysfunction of the institution. It's the dysfunction of one party in the institution. Amazingly, I think, was it our pal Jonathan, was it JVL, who said something like the Republicans turned the Democrats into a better party, that the Democrats are actually holding their coalitions together and, sort of in more fighting trim.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are both old enough to remember when, the joke was that, the Democrats were not an organized party, right? That they were always fighting with one another. The Republicans always fell into line. Now that's been absolutely flipped on its head.
The Republicans were a church. I remember somebody saying to me, Republicans are a church, Democrats are a street fight.
Yeah.
And it is the other way around. But that means it's unfair. And I think it's wrong to portray this to the American people as Congress is in disarray. Part of Congress is functioning in a perfectly normal way.
Well, okay. So what should Democrats do right now? I mean, where do you come down on this? So you had the 7 bomb throwers who said we're going to vacate the chair. The only way they were able to get rid of Kevin McCarthy is that if every Democrat went along with this. So there are Republicans who will say, well, wait, okay, so we had 7, bomb throwers who blew up, the speakership, but Democrats went along with this. The reason why there is no speaker is because every single Democrat voted to vacate the chair.
It's just so awesome. Well, that is such an awesome evasion of responsibility. As if that, if we do the thought experiment, right, and let's say, Nancy Pelosi were endangered by, I don't know who's that far. That Cory Bush, and 5 other Democrats said, well, we're going to take down Nancy Pelosi. Could you imagine anybody saying in the Republican caucus, now, guys, the constitutionally responsible thing to do here is to help Nancy Pelosi, and they'd be laughing their asses off and saying, this is going to be, they'd be ordering pizza and popcorn, and it's because it's not. And you've pointed this out to people many times, as I have. It is not the job of the opposition party to rescue the majority party from its own idiocy and internal political squabbles. But at this point,
what happens now?
I don't know. I was just thinking that I'm sure Democrats are eager to know what Tom and Charlie think they should do. So they're not going to take our advice. But if at some point, this dysfunction becomes so dangerous, this Republican dysfunction becomes so dangerous that if the Republicans say, look, we're going to have something like a compromise speaker that you can live with, that gets us out of this, and you got to, and Hakeem Jeffries needs to give X number of his people a pass. This happens by the way, in Charlie, this from working there, and we both know this, but that sometimes the party leaders will give a set number of their guys a pass to say, look, go vote against us with the opposition on this, and we won't hold it against you. It's necessary to do, like on the Gulf War. The first Gulf War, I saw it with my own eyes, where guys that were against the war voted for the war, and guys that were for the war took a pat. There was horse trading to make it come out that the war could happen. So could something like that happen? I mean, what do you think?
It might have
I think it could, but it's unlikely.
Well, no, everything that's going to happen.
But who's the
right
candidate that would be that?
Okay, but every possible scenario is unlikely. So so we are left
that's a very
with
good point.
They rule out the impossible, and we're going to be left with the improbable, right? But it's going to be something improbable. Okay, so what are the various options? Jim Jordan, which I don't think he's going to get to 217, total freaking clown show. The return of Kevin McCarthy, I just don't see how that happens. Given the fact that they've already blown it up. There's talk about having some sort of a bipartisan compromise that would give the acting speaker, Patrick McHenry, more power to run the House. And Matt Gaetz is very upset about this idea, because Matt Gaetz understands that if there's any sort of a bipartisan compromise, he is completely marginalized. He suddenly becomes irrelevant. So that's possible. Is there somebody else, like a Tom Emmer, who's going to come out of the weeds? I mean, this is what's kind of fun, Tom. I don't know if you've done this, but go back and read the insider accounts like an hour before everything happens. And what you realize is that even the insiders of the insiders have no idea what's going on. I mean, honestly, it's remarkable. So I'm sitting here in Wisconsin. You're sitting in, where are you? Delaware?
Rhode Island.
No, Rhode Island. One of those small states. And yet we, the people who are in the know don't actually know anything. So what is going to happen? I mean, we are, I mean, where is this? Do I have this? Let me just see if I can call this up. I thought Jake Sherman's tweet last night really captured it. This was the moments after Steve Scalise said, screw it, I'm not going to get to 217. We're not going to have a speaker. He wrote, the House Republican Conference is a mess, complete and utter mess. They are no closer to picking a speaker. They are a month away from a shutdown. Israel is asking for aid, which needs to pass in the next few weeks. They are completely lost, and they have no idea how they will get out. So one option is that they don't get out, that it becomes the dumpster fire forever. But I don't know how at some point they don't sit down with some Democrats and try to work out some deal, which is mind-blowing when you think about it.
Well, and puts the Democrats in a really strong position if they decide to go that road. But I think then you're courting open war within the GOP, right?
We're close to that right now.
Right. They're not there yet. And I wonder if they're willing to go down that road. I want to believe, taking your scenarios, I want to believe that no matter what, enough Republicans say that Jim Jordan in the speaker's chair would be so completely unacceptable, right, that they just have to either come together on any solution. I think keeping McHenry in the chair, that in some ways that's the worst of all possible worlds, right? I mean, then they can just have this fight every day over and over and over again. They'd almost be better off to say, fine, Patrick McHenry is the new speaker, if they could all agree on that. But this notion that they find somebody somewhere and that 5 Democrats get the Jedi, hand wave is fascinating. But I'm having a failure of imagination to say, could things actually get that bad?
Yeah.
That this becomes that what was, this situation of separated powers becomes a parliament, basically like a parliamentary system.
Well, I think it can get a lot worse than that. I mean, if they don't do something, the government shuts down, There's no aid for Israel, certainly no aid for Ukraine. All kinds of other bad things happen. But let's say they come up with some sort of a compromise. I mean, for the Democrats, I mean, there's got to be a few red lines, right? I mean, what my proposal would be, you're not ever going to vote for or open the door for anyone who is an election denialist who voted to decertify the results of the 2020 election. I think that would be a red line. Number two, I think that you have to demand that, okay, we're going to keep the government open. We're not going to do that. I think that
because Jordan's already threatened to shut it down again.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, there's no point in making any kind of a deal if you don't have a deal on that. So you have to make a deal on Israel. I don't know whether they make a deal on Ukraine. I don't know whether it's possible for them to say, okay, you want us to bail you out, you have to drop this the sham impeachment hearing. But there are some basic things that they could perhaps get done. But here's the thing. You know, we're talking about all of this chaos, turmoil, anarchy, paralysis, and dysfunction today. And probably it's going to last for several days. But even when they resolve this, it doesn't change this dynamic, right? I mean, whoever gets in will have the same Republican Party, the same incentive structures, the same need to bow the knee and kiss the ass of Donald Trump, who is the ultimate agent of chaos. They'll still only have a 4-vote majority. You still have people who want to blow the place up. So we're going to leap, we're going to lurch from one chaotic moment to the next. And the stakes will keep rising, right? So it's chaos about electing a speaker. It's going to be chaos when it comes to keeping the government open. It's going to be chaos when we decide what kind of foreign aid we do. It's going to be chaos when they, continue the impeachment votes. I mean, so there's no resolution at the end of this.
The thing that has to get done, I think, before they can move forward is that the Republican conference has to figure out how do we undo the deal first of all, that created this possibility? That how do we undo what Kevin McCarthy did?
Yeah.
And to say, but also there, and now I'm just wish casting. Where is the come to Jesus moment where you sit down with these half a dozen reps and say, can't have it anymore,
Yeah.
The De Niro and Goodfellas moment. Can't have it. I can't have it, Henry.
Yeah. I mean, and this is the come to Jesus moment may be the normie Republicans who have gone along with all of this, kept their heads down, been told that, you have to be loyal foot soldiers here. The come to Jesus moment may be when they realize, okay, we're out of here. We actually have clout. We're tired of just watching the extremists get their way. We are going to, sit down with the Democrats. Now, by the way, it's complete fan fiction that any Republican is going to vote for a Democrat. That is not going to happen, right? I mean, can we just leave this aside? This is deeply unserious conversation. But, you have, a dozen, maybe 20 normie Republicans who could say, you know what, we have the balance of power. We could go find some counterparts on the other side, and then everything changes. The way legislation is drawn up, the way legislation is voted on, the way the committees are structured. We could run this place if we wanted to. And if we decided to do that, all of the clowns with flamethrowers would be reduced to, to the backbenches.
It's not entirely, I mean, it's Friday and we're allowed to have little flights of fancy on at the end of the week after a tough week. But it's not entirely fan fiction. It's kind of the Jim Jeffords, scenario, kind of in a smaller scale and without flipping the parties. I mean, it's not like they suddenly changed their voter registration, but a lot of those Republicans are in districts that voted for Joe Biden.
Well, that's right.
I mean, just as the incentives for the clown caucus is to be as difficult and ridiculous as possible, these people also have an incentive to work with Democrats and to tout that when they run for re-election. When I was a working political scientist and a professor all those years, I was not a fan of parliamentary systems.
Yeah.
I will say, though, at a moment like this is when you would have what's called a clarifying election, right? You would just say, okay, everybody stop what they're doing. The whole country's going to vote. We're going to say, how many seats do you really want in Congress for this and for that? I don't think that works in this country very well because we are so polarized and because of a lot of structural things. But the problem is we're not going to get a clarifying election until 2024.